The screens in Outpost 17's command center flickered to life with an alert, pulsing a menacing red against the dimly lit room. Commander Elena Reyes barely had a moment to process the words. Unknown fleet incoming, non-human. Before her instincts kicked in, every nerve on high alert. She tapped the panel in front of her, pulling up the visual feed, and there, against the star-streaked void, loomed the unmistakable shadow of an alien fleet, their sleek ships slicing through the darkness like obsidian blades. The crew around her buzzed with nervous energy, their voices hushed but laced with tension. She spotted Lieutenant Alex Kim across the room, his face a mixture of fear and fascination as he stared at the screen. Barely out of the academy, Kim was fresh-faced and eager, still idealistic about the galaxy despite humanity's rocky history with other species. Reyes felt a pang of pity. He hadn't yet learned that out here, diplomacy could be a dangerous illusion. "Commander, orders from Earth," Kim said, snapping back to attention and stepping closer. "They're instructing us to open a line of negotiation." Reyes' jaw tightened. She had her own reservations about this approach, but orders were orders. Still, her instincts screamed that this wasn't a time for words. The aliens they were facing, the Kaldar, were infamous for their disdain toward lesser species. She'd seen their handiwork before, colonies left in ruin, entire populations enslaved or worse. "Patch me through, Lieutenant," she said, voice calm but edged with steel. As Kim keyed in the necessary commands, she took a deep breath, mentally preparing for the interaction. The holographic screen in front of her shimmered, then stabilized, forming the image of an alien figure, tall and posing, with skin the color of polished slate and eyes that gleamed like molten metal. The Kaldar ambassador, Sithaka, regarded her with a look that combined amusement and contempt. "Human commander," Sithaka began, his voice a silken, dissonant hum that seemed to vibrate the very air in the command center. "I am here to offer you a single chance. Surrender your outpost, your technology, and submit to Kaldar sovereignty. Resistance will not be tolerated." Reyes straightened, locking eyes with the alien. "Ambassador Sithaka, humanity has never bowed to threats. We seek peaceful solutions, but we will defend ourselves if forced." A faint smile played on Sithaka's lips. "Peace is a construct of the weak. It is survival that dictates the universe, and your species barely qualifies." The call ended abruptly, leaving the room heavy with silence. Reyes turned to her crew, assessing their expressions, fearful, yes, but also resolute. She knew they looked to her for strength, for a plan. "Kim," she said quietly, "prepare the outpost defenses. Activate the plasma barriers and set the pulse cannons on standby." Kim's face registered surprise, but he nodded, snapping into action. Reyes knew she was disobeying Earth's directive for continued negotiation, but she couldn't risk waiting for diplomacy to fail. She turned back to the main screen, watching as the alien fleet shifted position, their formation tightening, a sure sign they were preparing for an offensive strike. "They're not giving us much time," Kim murmured, returning to her side. The young lieutenant's hands shook as he adjusted the controls, but his voice remained steady. "Commander, do you really think we can hold them off?" Reyes glanced at him, seeing the hope and doubt mingled in his eyes. "We don't have a choice, Lieutenant. We're the last line between them and Earth. If we fail, they'll move on to the colonies, then the homeworld." Kim swallowed, visibly bracing himself. "Understood, Commander. What's the plan?" Reyes outlined her strategy quickly, efficient but thorough, her words clipped with urgency. "We need to hit them fast and unpredictably. They won't expect us to go on the offensive. We use the outpost's asteroid field for cover, maneuver between the rocks, and draw them into range of our cannons. Their shields may be advanced, but they're not invincible." A faint smile flickered on Kim's lips. "Using our weakness as a strength. I like it." Just as Reyes began to feel a surge of confidence in their plan, the command console blared a shrill alarm. A cold dread settled over her as she read the new alert. Shield integrity compromised. Breach detected. They're already hacking our systems. she muttered, realizing with horror that the Kaeldar weren't just attacking from the outside, they were inside, infiltrating their defenses through digital warfare. Kim, initiate countermeasures. Shut down all external connections and reroute power to manual systems. Her mind raced, heart pounding as she considered their options. She could practically feel the clock ticking down. They were outgunned and outnumbered, facing an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. The crew moved with an urgency born of desperation, hands flying over consoles, the tension thick enough to taste. Every second counted now. Reyes's thoughts started back to Sithaka's parting words, the dismissive cruelty in his voice. Her anger flared, fueling her resolve. Humanity had faced impossible odds before. They were survivors, fighters. Commander! Kim's voice cut through her thoughts. Pulse cannons are online, targeting systems locked. Awaiting your command. Reyes exhaled, steadying herself. This was it. They'd throw everything they had into this one chance. All right, Lieutenant. On my mark, fire! The pulse cannons roared to life, unleashing blinding streams of energy toward the Kaeldar fleet. The alien ships responded immediately, their sleek hulls weaving through the assault, shields flaring as they absorbed the blasts. Explosions dotted the void as some of the alien drones succumbed, but the larger ships pressed forward, undeterred. As the outpost shuddered under return fire, Reyes realized they were on the razor's edge of survival. But she also felt a fierce pride in her crew's resolve, their courage in the face of overwhelming odds. They had bought themselves a sliver of time, enough to recalibrate their defenses and perhaps even strike again. Yet, as the Kaeldar ships drew closer, Reyes knew that this was only the beginning. The alien fleet was testing them, probing for weaknesses, and she could sense that their patience was wearing thin. The full force of their wrath was still to come, and her outpost was a lone light against the vastness of the enemy's power. We're not finished yet, Reyes muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. Her gaze hardened, and she clenched her fists, steeling herself for the battle that lay ahead. In the silence that followed, she caught Kim's steady gaze, a silent question hanging between them. Reyes nodded, answering the question without words. They would stand. They would fight. And if necessary, they would fall together. The outpost trembled under the relentless impact of alien fire, its metal framework groaning as another blast shook the command center. Commander Elena Reyes tightened her grip on the edge of her console, her gaze steady, yet every nerve alight with tension. She glanced over at Lieutenant Kim, who was feverishly typing commands into his terminal, sweat beading on his forehead. Status report, Lieutenant, she demanded, her voice cutting through the tense silence. Kim didn't look up. Shields are at 50% and dropping, Commander. Defensive pulse cannons are firing, but they're barely slowing the Kaeldar ships down. They seem to be testing us, looking for weak points. Reyes clenched her jaw. They're not just testing us, Kim. They're sending a message. She inhaled sharply, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. If they break through here, Earth's next. We can't let that happen. A high-pitched alarm blared, signaling another system breach. The Kaeldar had adapted faster than anticipated, shifting their tactics with chilling efficiency. Every pulse, every maneuver of their fleet seemed calculated, designed to chip away at the outpost's defenses like a precise blade to soft flesh. Kim's voice cracked with tension. Commander, if they keep this up, we'll lose shields entirely in minutes. Reyes looked into Kim's eyes, seeing the desperation beneath his professional facade. We'll buy ourselves more time, she said. Send a decoy transmission. Make it look like we've called for reinforcements from the nearest colony. Maybe they'll hesitate if they think we're not alone. A flicker of hope crossed his face. Understood. Creating the transmission now. As Kim worked, Reyes scanned the incoming data feeds, trying to predict the Kaeldar fleet's next move. She wasn't entirely sure if the aliens would fall for the decoy, but she needed any edge she could grasp. Every second they stalled was one more breath for her crew, one more heartbeat for humanity. The holographic interface blinked to life again, and the imposing figure of Ambassador Sithaka reappeared, his expression unreadable, but his eyes gleaming with disdain. "Human Commander Reyes," he drawled, his voice a grating echo that filled the room. "Your attempts to deceive us are quaint. Reinforcements from a colony that barely knows of your existence? You humans cling to such illusions. Surrender, and I might consider sparing your outpost." Reyes met his gaze without flinching, steeling herself. "If you're so certain of our inferiority, why bother with this conversation, Ambassador?" Her words were measured, dripping with defiance. "It's almost as if you need our surrender, like you're afraid of what might happen if we don't comply." A dark smile curved along Sithaka's lips, and the alien's eyes narrowed. "We are not afraid. We merely prefer efficiency, Commander. Your defiance is inefficient." Reyes resisted the urge to scoff, sensing a sliver of doubt behind his mocking tone. "If you value efficiency, Ambassador, then you've underestimated humanity's capacity for resistance. We're not backing down, and we're certainly not surrendering." Without another word, she severed the connection, the image of Sithaka dissolving into static. Silence hung heavy in the room, punctuated only by the hum of machinery and the distant rumble of alien weaponry battering their shields. Kim released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Do you think they'll come at us harder now?" Reyes exhaled slowly, her gaze fixed on the blank screen where Sithaka's image had been. "They will. But I'd rather face their full wrath than give them the satisfaction of our surrender." Just then, another alarm blared, this one from the tactical display. Reyes's eyes widened as she saw it, a second Kalar ship, larger than the others, moving into position above the outpost, as if preparing for a final, crushing blow. "They're not holding back anymore," she murmured. "Lieutenant, divert all remaining power to the shields and weapons. We're going all in." Kim hesitated, his fingers hovering over the controls. "Commander, that'll drain our life support system. If the shields fall, then we go down fighting," Reyes said, her voice steady, though the weight of her decision felt like a lead anchor in her chest. "The crew signed up for this. They knew the risks." Kim nodded, swallowing hard. "Understood. Power diverted." As the outpost shuddered once more, Reyes forced herself to stay focused, her mind churning through every tactical option left. The odds were near impossible, but she wasn't about to let the Kaildar crush humanity without a fight. "Commander," Kim said quietly, breaking the silence, "I want to say thank you for standing up for us, for not backing down." Reyes looked at him, surprised by the intensity in his eyes. "I didn't sign up to watch humanity get pushed around, Lieutenant. This is bigger than us." Just then, a deafening crash reverberated through the command center, sending sparks flying as a nearby console exploded. Reyes shielded her face, blinking through the haze of smoke as she heard panicked voices from other stations. "Commander!" Kim shouted, pointing at the tactical display. "They've breached the outer perimeter. We're completely exposed." Reyes's mind raced, every nerve alight with a single directive: survive. But beneath that, another thought pulsed, a dark, desperate instinct. "Lieutenant, what's the status of the outpost's central core?" Kim frowned, catching the edge in her tone. "Fully operational, but if you're thinking of overloading it, Commander, that would mean... It would mean taking them down with us," Reyes finished, her voice a grim whisper. "If there's no way out, we won't give them the satisfaction of claiming our technology. We'll turn this outpost into a weapon." Kim hesitated, visibly grappling with the gravity of her plan. "Commander, I understand." He took a deep breath. "But there's got to be a way to get word to Earth, let them know what's happening here." A surge of respect flickered in Reyes's chest. Kim might have been young, but he had the spirit of a fighter. "If we can't win, Lieutenant, we'll make sure they know what we're capable of." Just then, another violent tremor rocked the room, followed by a flashing alert that filled the screen: shields failing, complete loss imminent. Reyes clenched her fists, her heart pounding as she looked around at her crew, her people, each of them fighting with everything they had. "All right, listen up," she called out, her voice echoing through the room. "We're initiating a final defensive protocol. Prepare to overload the core if necessary. Kim's face was pale but resolute. "I'm with you, Commander. To the end." A solemn silence fell over the room as the reality of their last stand settled in. Reyes's eyes flicked to the tactical display, where the massive Kaeldar ship loomed like an omen. With a final, steadying breath, Reyes raised her voice, her words carrying a fierce resolve. "We may be outnumbered and outgunned, but we are not defeated. Humanity will remember this day. And so will they." The crew held their ground, every heartbeat a promise to resist, to endure. And as the Kaeldar ship moved in for the kill, Reyes prepared to show them the true mettle of humanity. The outpost shook violently, its metal framework groaning under the unrelenting assault. Commander Elena Reyes staggered, catching herself on the edge of the command console. The red emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the command center, heightening the grim resolve etched into the faces of her crew. This was their last stand, and everyone knew it. Lieutenant Kim wiped blood from a fresh cut on his forehead, his hands trembling as he glanced at the readings on his console. "Commander, shields are completely down. Our outer hull won't hold for much longer." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Reyes nodded, absorbing the weight of their predicament. They had no escape, no reinforcements, and precious little time. "Activate the core overload sequence, Lieutenant," she said firmly, her voice echoing in the hushed room. "If they're taking us, they're not taking our technology." Kim swallowed, his fingers hovering over the controls. "Yes, Commander." His hands moved with purpose, initiating the sequence that would turn the outpost into a massive, explosive trap. The hum of the core intensifying filled the air, a sound both terrifying and oddly reassuring. It was the sound of defiance. Outside, the Kaeldar fleet repositioned, their largest vessel looming like a predatory shadow. Through the tactical display, Reyes watched as the alien ships methodically closed in. There was a ruthless efficiency to their movements, a cold precision that chilled her to the core. Suddenly, the outpost sensors detected a surge of energy from the Kaeldar flagship, a shimmering wave of light that swept outward, surrounding the human outpost like an iron fist. "Commander," Kim's voice quivered with dread. "They're deploying some kind of energy field. I think they're trying to lock us in, to prevent the core explosion from reaching their fleet." Reyes's mind raced, analyzing their options in rapid-fire bursts. The Kaeldar were clever, more so than she'd given them credit for. They anticipated her final gambit, and were closing off her only path to an honorable end. But Reyes was nothing if not resourceful. "Lieutenant, what's our current power reserve for the pulse cannons?" she asked, a spark of hope flickering in her chest. Kim glanced at the readout, his brow furrowing. "We have barely enough to fire one sustained burst, Commander, but we wouldn't have the strength to break through that field. It's too concentrated." A daring idea crystallized in Reyes's mind, reckless yet strangely perfect. "Then we don't break through," she replied, her tone laced with fierce determination. "We channel the pulse directly into their shield generator. We'll overload their systems, force them to lower the field, and maybe even create an opening for a counterattack." Kim's eyes widened as he caught on, a glimmer of renewed hope breaking through his exhaustion. Redirecting a pulse that powerful, it could destabilize their whole network. Reyes allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Exactly. Let's make it happen." She turned to the rest of her crew, who were watching with a mixture of trepidation and determination. "Listen up, everyone. This isn't just about survival anymore. This is about reminding them that humanity doesn't roll over. They came here expecting us to submit, to cower. Let's show them we're made of sterner stuff." A wave of silent resolve swept through the room. Her words ignited something in each of them, a shared defiance that bound them together in a singular purpose. "Kim," Reyes called, her voice unwavering. "Initiate the pulse cannon override. Channel everything we've got into that one shot." Kim's fingers flew across the console as he reconfigured the system, redirecting power from all non-essential operations into the pulse cannons. The hum of the core reached a fever pitch, the consoles around them flickering as the power grid strained under the surge. "All systems primed, Commander," Kim reported, his voice barely audible over the thrumming energy. On your mark. Reyes took a steadying breath, her gaze fixed on the colossal Kaeldar flagship. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her hands were steady as she pressed the final command. Fire! The pulse cannon erupted in a blinding beam of energy, cutting through the darkness like a blazing comet. The concentrated blast tore through space, striking the Kaeldar flagship's shield generator with pinpoint accuracy. The alien vessel shuddered, its once impenetrable shield flickering wildly before dissipating in a cascade of electric blue sparks. Direct hit! Kim shouted, unable to contain his excitement. Their field is collapsing! A cheer rippled through the command center, a rare sound of triumph amidst the chaos. Reyes felt a surge of pride, but her instincts reminded her that the fight was far from over. The Kaeldar flagship, though wounded, was still a formidable opponent. Commander, I'm detecting an energy spike from the alien ship, Kim said, his voice tense again. It looks like they're charging their main weapon, probably a retaliatory strike. Reyes clenched her fists, knowing the odds were stacked against them. They had bought themselves a moment of hope, but the Kaeldar weren't going to let them go that easily. Her mind raced, assessing their options. They didn't have enough power to fire another pulse, and their shields were gone. But then, an idea sparked, a gamble, as reckless as it was brilliant. Lieutenant, what if we diverted the core's overload into the structural framework? Turn the outpost itself into a directed explosive, aimed right at the Kaeldar flagship? Kim's face paled. Commander, if we do that, there's no coming back. Reyes met his gaze, unflinching. There was never going to be a way back, Lieutenant. If we go down, we're taking them with us. Kim's jaw tightened as he processed her words. Then, with a firm nod, he turned to his console, his hands steady and resolute. I'm with you, Commander. Let's make this count. Together, they initiated the final override, channeling the remaining energy from the core into the outpost structure. The hum of the core rose to a deafening roar, vibrations shaking the entire station as the power surged through its metal veins. Everyone, brace yourselves! Reyes called out, her voice carrying a fierce, unyielding strength. We're about to make history. Through the viewport, she saw the Kaeldar flagship looming closer, its weapon systems preparing to unleash devastation upon them. But Reyes knew they'd struck a nerve. This was no longer a cold, calculated extermination. The Kaeldar were angry, desperate to squash humanity's defiance. The final override activated, and the outpost shuddered as the core reached critical overload. Reyes took one last breath, her gaze locked on the enemy ship. For Earth, she whispered, a promise in her words. In an explosion of blinding light, the outpost detonated, a brilliant supernova of human defiance. The blast wave engulfed the Kaeldar flagship, consuming its hull in a cascade of fire and shrapnel. And then, as the dust settled and silence reclaimed the void, there was nothing left but the memory of humanity's final stand. A dense silence enveloped the battlefield, the debris of Outpost 17 drifting slowly through the black void. The remnants of the Kaeldar flagship, still glowing from the explosion, floated in shattered pieces. The once great alien warship was now a field of twisted metal and fractured armor, a monument to the defiance of humanity. Aboard the small escape pod cloaked in the shadows of the debris, Commander Elena Reyes stirred. Consciousness returned slowly, her mind swimming as memories of the last moments flooded back. She'd set the overload, watched her outpost blaze with fury, and somehow, against all odds, she was still here. Reyes's fingers trembled as she unstrapped herself from the pod seat, glancing around to confirm the impossible. Her escape pod had been blasted clear from the wreckage, miraculously intact. Kim? She called, her voice hoarse. Silence answered her. Her heart sank as she looked around the cramped cabin. Kim had stayed behind, guiding the final sequence while she'd been forced into the pod in their last desperate bid for survival. A pang of sorrow gripped her chest, but she forced herself to focus. She had one duty left, one last mission: survive, carry the memory of her crew, and deliver the message of their sacrifice back to Earth. Through the pod's viewport, Reyes saw the vast debris field stretching endlessly. glowing remnants of both the outpost and the Kaeldar ships drifted like dying stars. She maneuvered her pod carefully, weaving through the twisted fragments, hoping to avoid any remaining Kaeldar presence. Her fingers danced over the console, activating the distress beacon in a series of short pulses. There was no telling if anyone would hear it, but she clung to hope. For hours she drifted in silence, her mind replaying the last hours over and over, Kim's determined face, the echoing hum of the core, the blinding light of the final explosion. Each memory sharpened her resolve, a quiet fire within that refused to extinguish. Suddenly, the pod's radar pinged. Reyes's pulse quickened, and she adjusted the display to get a clearer reading. An object was approaching, but it wasn't Kaeldar. The shape was familiar, metallic, and distinctly human. Reyes's heart surged with a mix of relief and disbelief. Moments later, the ship came into view, a rugged Earth battleship, its hull scratched and dented, but resilient. The communications panel crackled to life. Unidentified vessel, this is the EAS Resolute. We're receiving your distress signal. Identify yourself. Reyes exhaled a shaky breath, her voice filled with restrained emotion. This is Commander Elena Reyes of Outpost 17. Requesting immediate assistance. A pause followed, and then a voice returned, laced with awe. Commander Reyes. We thought Outpost 17 was lost. Stand by for retrieval. Within minutes, the Resolute's docking bay loomed before her, and as her pod settled into place, Reyes felt the weight of her ordeal catch up to her. The hatch opened, revealing a group of officers and medics who stared at her with expressions ranging from respect to astonishment. A tall, weathered officer stepped forward, offering a crisp salute. Commander Reyes, welcome aboard. I'm Captain Harris. She returned the salute, though fatigue pressed on her. Captain, I have a report for Earth Command. The Kaeldar fleet, our outpost managed to destroy their flagship, but it came at a high cost. My crew, they didn't make it. Harris's expression softened, a flicker of sorrow in his eyes. Your report can wait until you're rested, Commander. But know this, what you and your crew accomplished won't be forgotten. You showed the galaxy that humanity won't be bullied. Reyes nodded, a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion. That was the message. We wanted them to know that Earth may be small, but we don't bend, and we don't break. Captain Harris guided her through the corridors of the Resolute, their footsteps echoing softly. As they walked, the crew members they passed looked at her with a mixture of admiration and pride, each one standing a little taller, emboldened by the knowledge of Outpost 17's sacrifice. In the debriefing room, Reyes recounted the battle, describing every tactic, every desperate decision. She relayed how her crew fought with unyielding bravery, how Kim's final act had allowed her to make it out alive. She watched as Captain Harris's expression shifted from respect to awe, the weight of her words settling into the room. As she finished, Reyes leaned back, the exhaustion and grief washing over her like a tidal wave. Harris remained silent for a moment before he spoke, his tone solemn. Commander, the Kaeldar have spread terror across countless systems. What you and your crew did today, you've given humanity a symbol of hope, a reminder of our resilience. Outpost 17's stand will echo across the galaxy. Reyes nodded, a quiet pride blooming within her, tempered by sorrow. The Kaeldar will come again. But now, they'll know we're not easy prey. They'll remember the day humans stood against them and refused to fall. Harris smiled, a glint of steel in his gaze. They may come, but we'll be ready. And when they do, they'll face the spirit of every last one of us. After a long pause, Reyes stood, a newfound determination steadying her. She wasn't merely a survivor, she was a bearer of her crew's legacy, a living testament to the courage of those who'd stood beside her. As Captain Harris escorted her back to her quarters, Reyes glanced through a viewport at the stars beyond, her thoughts a tribute to those she had lost. The vastness of space stretched endlessly, but she no longer felt dwarfed by it. Instead, she saw a frontier waiting to be defended, a challenge humanity would rise to meet. In the quiet of her quarters, she closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of peace. Kim's face drifted into her thoughts, and she whispered a silent promise to him, and the crews she'd left behind. Asterisk, your courage wasn't in vain. The galaxy will remember. Asterisk. Outside, the Resolute sailed onward, a ship strengthened by the legacy of those who'd fought for a cause greater than themselves. And somewhere in the cold depths of space, the remnants of the Kaeldar fleet drifted, silent witnesses to the resolve of a species that would not yield. The Kaeldar had learned a lesson that day, a lesson that would spread through their ranks and beyond. Humanity might be underestimated, their numbers few, but their spirit was indomitable, unbreakable. In that silent, infinite expanse, one truth resonated: Earth and her people would stand, no matter the cost. And so, the Resolute carried Reyes and her message home, a beacon for the battles yet to come and a testament to the unyielding defiance of humanity.